Introducing the new DigiCert. As the leading provider of high-assurance SSL, TLS, and PKI certificates, DigiCert is all about improving security across the web and IoT. DigiCert is committed to helping customers and partners successfully deploy identity, authentication, and encryption solutions. They'll even help you figure out which certificate you need to secure your web domains, apps, devices, and more. Check out the Cert Wizard tool under the SSL tab on digicert.com. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Just a quick note, if you want to catch some of our previous webcasts, these are ones we both do for the community that we advertise out, and as well as some of our on-demand ones, which run all the time. There's a great mixture there. You can go to securityweekly.com/on-demand and catch a number of our previous webcasts on penetration testing, security awareness, endpoint protection, defending enterprise applications, all kinds of stuff. Make sure you go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. With that, I would like to introduce our next guest, Masha Sedova. She is currently the co-founder of Elevate Security. She previously has worked for Salesforce.com and presented at Black Hat RSA, as well as other conferences. It's very nice to welcome Masha to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
And Masha, you're of course speaking at Source Boston on the topic of essentially end user security awareness. And before we get into that, Masha, I want to know how you got your start in information security.
Yeah, I've actually, it's what I studied in college. I've always known that I wanted to be in security, which I hear is a pretty unusual pathway to get in. But I love the idea of there being a group of good guys and bad guys, and this ongoing ability to defend ourselves and fight against, this onslaught of hackers, which was a little bit more romantic when I got started than it is now, but it's still a great ride.
Now, you must have been one of the early cybersecurity programs. I mean, because cybersecurity programs they haven't been around that long, and so you were entering into degree programs and chose to go into cybersecurity?
So I have a formal degree in computer science, but I was part of a really cool program called CyberCore, Scholarship for Service, and they pay for 2 years of school in exchange for working for government or defense, or working as a contractor for a defense organization for 2 years in exchange for having your school paid for. And it was really cool because I got to work on some cool forensic cases for Secret Service and customs that I don't know that I would trust a 19-year-old with these days.
So you were 19 doing forensics for those government organizations. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
And so how did you get involved in end-user security awareness?
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated with the human element of security, initially from the offense perspective, seeing what, from a forensics perspective, where someone would hide secrets or data, and from a cyber analyst perspective, what foreign threat actors were using against U.S. infrastructure to be able to get in. When I joined Salesforce, I initially started work on an insider threat program, and I found that it was a very challenging environment to do insider threat, coming from more of a government background. And I became obsessed with this idea of what would it look like if people wanted to do security instead of had to? And what would that look like from defending an organization against insider threats? And if you could get people to report suspicious activity, not out of fear, but because they were internally and intrinsically motivated to do so, what would a security of an organization look like if that could be the case? And that question kept me up at night, and I started doing a whole bunch of research, which brought me to my current field.
Now, hearing you describe that, Masha, it seems like you created your own role at Salesforce. Like, what was that like? Like, you identified a problem, you researched the solution. It almost seems like to me on the surface, you created your own role at the company, which is a very large, successful company, by the way.
Yeah, it's really astute question of you. I was hired for a role that I think was doomed for failure. We didn't have an appetite for insider threat as much as the security team thought we did. And I realized that if I was going to be successful, I had to reinvent what I was going to do at the company. So I took a look at the security awareness training we had. And if anyone has ever worked for a large organization, you know what I ran into. It was this like, click the box, next, and then snooze, right? And I found it so frustrating because we're trying to defend ourselves against these really sophisticated adversaries. And the best we could do was this check the box training. I was like, that's nuts. There's got to be a better way. And I realized security people haven't done a great job at figuring out how we relate to other people. We're really great at relating to technology, but not to other people. But there are many disciplines that have figured it out. So behavioral science, psychology, advertising, marketing. So I started soaking up all of this data around other practices and other frameworks and said, how do we apply this to security? And I saw that no one else was doing it, but I didn't think that anyone was doing security awareness much better. So it seemed like a place ripe for innovation.
I love that you essentially were working for an organization and much like a startup decided that you needed to pivot to be successful. Secondly, having just gotten through the Phoenix project as well as the Beyond Phoenix project, which largely, and I didn't understand the depth they went into, borrowed from other disciplines to apply that to security. It sounds like you did the same thing. So what were some of the works that were most pivotal to your work in other disciplines that you were able to apply to security?
Yeah, great question. And before I get into telling you what was most pivotal, I think the industry as a whole, security industry as a whole, can greatly benefit from cross collaborations with other industries. And so if we can bring in more diversity of skill sets, for whatever it looks like, and teach people security, we can learn from lawyers, from marketing folks, from writers, a lot that we haven't been able to organically grow in the field ourselves. There's probably 3 books that I found to be super pivotal. First of all was one on gamification and effective game design called Reality is Broken. And it unpacked what it is that makes a game successful. And I started taking those principles and applying them to not games, so business functions, and applying game mechanics to business functions or security functions to drive the behavior I want. So creating feedback and leaderboards and opportunities for mastery, all the elements that make gaming really successful. So creating my own gamification programs.
So hold on. It's kind of like when you were playing in the arcade and you had your unique initials and you were on the leaderboard. Like that's a psychological thing that really plays into much of what we, I think, aspire to be as human beings, right?
Totally. Because, some people don't care about security. We can't make them care about security because if they were cared about security, they would be on the security team, right? But they're an art developer or whatever, marketing person. But we can get them to care about winning, or we can get them to care about showing off in front of their friends or their team, or recognition for good work. So things that are intrinsic to us as human beings, if we can connect that to security, we can get people to be bought into security for reasons other than security.
Right.
And there's a whole toolbox that we aren't leveraging, and we should be.
You make me think of my middle son who he hates to lose more than any other person I've met in my entire life. And sometimes educators and others, in his life are kind of like talking to us about it like it's almost a negative thing. And I'm like, yeah, like I get it. Like he loses it when he loses. I'm like, but his desire to win is a great quality. And you're kind of preying upon that for security awareness training.
Totally. I find that people in sales and executive leaders are they're totally in for a good game, especially
Right.
where they can win.
Hmm.
I have found that developers and engineering are more motivated by the ability for self-expression
Yeah.
or accomplishment. So if you can give them an opportunity where they can show off being smarter than their peers and acknowledge that they've solved a problem that was unsolvable, for example, and give them a platform to be recognized for that intellectual contribution, uh, is better than gold.
Yeah, that's a fantastic summary of the sociological aspects of our field in so many different ways. That was awesome. So I guess that answers my question of how important is the gamification of security awareness training. I mean, it's really preying upon our needs, wants, and desires, and of people in various groups in the organization, right?
Yeah. So, I find that gamification is a loaded term. People say, I'm not into playing games at work.
Mm.
And I can appreciate that. So what I've evolved my understanding, I was saying my first book was that I loved reading was about gamification. The second book I really loved reading was about positive incentives. And this book was called Drive by Daniel Pink. And it's all about what drives us. And this is autonomy, creativity, and mastery, about things that we intrinsically want. And the positive incentives that we get is not necessarily money or not even a leaderboard, but the ability to say, thank you for doing that, or that was a good behavior. I would like more of that. The same way that we train small children or dogs.
I was going to say, in my children, I have 3 children, and positive reinforcement, I found, as many parents out there have also discovered, right, is far more successful than punishment. And the advice that we get externally of our children when we talk to the doctors, teachers, and whoever else is involved, martial arts instructors, whoever else is involved in our children's lives, the good ones will recommend that positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with dog trainers, right? If you
we have 4 dogs as well, so totally get that as well.
And how many kids?
We have 3 kids, 4 dogs.
You should be teaching this then.
Yeah. I have a lot of the stuff I've studied for our field. I do also apply to my home as well. It's very applicable.
Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, what have we done for security? We say, this is our policy. If you abide by it, you will hear nothing from us. And if you violate it, you better watch out, because it's usually punishment or fear of termination. So no one has any incentives other than negative reinforcement to do security, which is such a shame, because it's such a great opportunity to reinforce great behavior. And so what that shows up like is, I send you a phishing email, a mock phishing email. If you report it, if you don't click and report it, can I give you a thank you email and CC your manager and say, you have a security-minded employee. Thanks so much. This person isn't a risk to us. Or more importantly, if someone has made a mistake and then reported it, that is, I think, the biggest gold star we can give. Say, you admitted failure, which is a hard thing to do, but that is exactly what will get us to uncover if we have an attacker on a computer. Or,
Masha, why doesn't punishment work? And I think that in a lot of being in this field for more years than I care to admit, I've spoken with people that are like, I'm so frustrated with my users. I feel like when they make a mistake, I want to turn to public flogging or have like a stick, to beat them with. And I'm like, I don't think that's the right strategy. But why isn't that the right strategy?
It's a term called discretionary performance. So we will do the bare minimum to avoid getting punishment. But if you want people to go above and beyond the bare minimum, which is what we're asking them to do, we want you to think proactively and write secure code. We want you to uncover vulnerabilities in your architecture design and let us know things that we've never seen before. When you create a new process in finance, I want you to call us in and think through all the ways that, the secure data could be mishandled. All of that is way beyond the compliance checkbox. And so if we only punish, people will only do the minimum of what is asked of them to avoid that pain. But if we incentivize and if we reward, we will get much greater performance out of our employees from a security perspective than we could have ever possibly imagined.
Some believe, and we're talking about end user security awareness, and there are some, and some of those people are my good friends as well, and they take the opinion that, it's great to do security awareness. However, if I put my attacker hat on, I only need to fool one user to be successful in my attack against an organization. Therefore, all of the 99.9% of your other users that might want to do the good thing and abide by and benefit from security awareness training, it means nothing because I can always find that one user that I'm going to prey upon. What is your response to that, Masha?
Yeah. So the studies show in a report called The Inevitability of the Click that it takes 10 emails to guarantee that one person will click. So absolutely true. But if you think about it from an attacker standpoint, what if that email, that custom malware that you just wrote, that phishing attack that you just created for your spear phishing target gets forwarded to the security team that all of a sudden says, we're under attack. This is what the signature looks like. I want to quarantine all of their inboxes against this type of malware. And I want to make sure that I'm tracking the movement of anything that looks like this on my network. You've just alerted the security team that you're interested in them as a target. So it only takes one person to tell the security team, hey, you should check this out. So it's actually evening the odds in a way that we haven't really seen before from a red team perspective or an attacker's perspective, because if 1 in every 10 people forward a suspicious email to the security team and say, this is out of the norm for me, I need you to take a look, and the security team has the ability to respond and integrate that into their defenses, they've now alerted in a way that a technology stack might not have been able to, that an attacker is interested in an employee and is trying to get into your network. And if you think about it, 1 in 10 employees to report a suspicious activity isn't a hard ask. When I recommend reporting rates and metrics for programs, I actually say if you can get 20%, so 2 out of every 10 people, an extra person for redundancy, to report a suspicious activity for every attack you do, red team, mock phishing, so regardless of difficulty, you're covered. You're covered in a way that your technology might not be able to help you out.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, I was just sorry, Joff. I was just going to open it up to the rest of the Security Weekly crew for questions as well.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So my question along those lines is, first of all, before I ask the question, I am greatly in support of the idea of building bridges to the user community in any organization, because I think you're right. It absolutely amplifies the security effort and can yield extremely valuable results. My question is, what if you go too far? What if our end user community are not trained in the way that we are in the information security industry? So what if you create this 2 in 10 people, but you end up in the same breath creating a lot of false positive activity, and then the information security group in any one organization suddenly is overwhelmed by noise from the humans that they weren't dealing with before? How do you manage that sort of process in what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very valid question. I found that when I started this program at Salesforce, our reporting rates went up 350% in 6 months, just for some quick scale. In this case, automation is really important. If you've already seen an attack like that, to be able to, or an attack or a report, spam or phishing or otherwise, to be able to automate a response and say, thanks so much, we've already seen this, or thanks so much, we haven't seen this, we're going to take a look. So creating automation for that kind of response is really helpful. I think another way of getting community knowledge would be helpful. Say, has anyone else seen this? I haven't seen this in practice yet, but easing the burden off of the security team. So I've found that companies that actively use Slack, for example, can share common practices and said, I've seen this kind of phishing attack, you should report it, or I just reported this phishing attack, the security team told me it was this kind of result, so you may not need to. So being able to share some of that burden off of the security team to other people. But again, that's a little bit more forward thinking. The companies that I've seen that do it really well are the ones that utilize automation and email response in a more repeatable format.
Masha,
I think you just hit it. Sorry, Paul.
That's okay.
Automation to filter and reduce the false positive rate is much better than dealing with the false negative situation, which is awful, right? We want to be able to see stuff.
Now, Masha, I like your 20% kind of ratio, right? But employees tend to come and go. And so how do you structure the program when you might train employees, they get it when it comes to security awareness, but then those employees leave? I think one of the greatest pieces of business advice, I understand you're a co-founder of your own startup today, right? Separate conversations for Business Security Weekly, perhaps, but one of the greatest pieces of advice were employees come and go, and that's just kind of a nature of running a business. And when those employees leave that have that security awareness training, how do you continue the program and make sure that it's a continual process?
So I think that new hire onboarding is one of the most critical moments that a security team has in an organization. You have the opportunity to take someone whose culture expectations are still very malleable. And as you bring them in, you can say, security is so important for us here. And let me show you what it would be like to read the headlines of a breach article that has the name of our company. And if you were behind that, like, just give them that article, right? And give them a chance to read it and say, how does that feel? What would it be like if you were the reasons our customers left us, right? And then they're like, okay, I get it. What do I need to do? And now they listen and they say, security is really important. We only ask for 3 things here. This is my other pet peeve. We ask for so much of people. We just standardize on the 3 things that are most important for you.
Oh, and I love that. We talk about the magic number of 3 on Business Security Weekly all the time, right? People can only consume 3 things at a time, right?
3 things, yeah. So it doesn't matter if as a security team you need them to do 20 things. It doesn't matter because they can only hear 3. So as a security practitioner, do your homework. Figure out what are the 3 most critical, risk-focused things that you need your employees to know about. I personally would recommend don't click on links, don't download malware, and report suspicious activity as your top 3. We can debate whether or not tailgating is in there, and sensitive data handling always comes on top. 2FA adoption happens to have the top 5 slot often. But choose 3 and communicate those clearly, what the expectations are, how to do it, and when they do it, reward them. Reward when they actually participate in those 3 behaviors. And when you nail those 3 behaviors as a company, or even just one, rotate it out and bring in your next one.
How do we differentiate between security awareness and security training?
I don't like either, actually. I personally think I like security behavior change. Awareness is an interesting word because many people are aware that they need to have secure passwords. They don't actually have 40 unique long secure passwords. The behavior change we're asking for them to do is adopt a password manager. That yields the outcomes we want. So awareness is a foundational thing. You have to have this in your vision, but it doesn't mean you're going to do anything differently. So one of the things I'll be talking about at Source is how do we use behavior change to get to the outcomes we want. Security training is another element of behavior change. It gets to the ability for someone to do something. But again, just because you know the information, just because there is knowledge transfer, it doesn't mean someone is actually going to change their behavior, right? So I may know that I need to lose weight. I may know that I have calorie counts and I should eat salad. Doesn't mean I'm going to go running, right? There's a lot more things, like motivation needs to exist. I need to have working legs and a good pair of running shoes, as well as the knowledge that running is good for me. So you should know when you are applying awareness as your skill set, as your fix for tools in your toolbox. You should know why you're applying training. It's because someone doesn't know something, and knowing them is going to help bridge that gap. But it is possible that they don't care. It is possible that they don't have the ability to do it. And it is possible that they're never reminded to do it. And if you don't have those other three things, all the training in the world won't help you.
Some organizations, obviously based on, your presentations and many others in security, that basically evangelize the reward system. But there are different levels of reward. So, like, what's an example of a really bad reward versus a really good reward? And the example I come up with is in the context of bug bounties. I think last year we saw, in previous years we may have seen, companies are like, oh, you found a bug, like, I'll give you a T-shirt. And you're like, yeah, like, that's great. And then you see Microsoft today going, if you can find branch prediction vulnerabilities, we'll give you $250,000. That's a huge spectrum between T-shirt and $250,000. How do we structure rewards accordingly in our organizations in the context of security awareness?
So I love this question. I would almost always advise against money unless it is a significant sum, like $250,000. And the reason is, if you're going to have like $1,000 or even a couple $100, what happens is people start turning on in their mind something called market norms versus social norms. Market norms are when you say, this is worth this much money. And so when you ask me to do a bug bash, and the thing that you're going to give me money for is, let's say, $1,000 if I win, I'm going to do those calculations and say, I'm really busy. I got a lot of stuff to do. $1,000 would be nice, but I'm a pretty well paid developer. And I got other stuff, right?
Yeah, you're going to attach a value to your work, right?
Totally,
in monetarily. I mean, I watch Shark Tank, right? Like, it's all, dollars and cents. It's a calculation. Yeah,
and you're like, is it worth it? So when you start including things that I don't have access to, and most of the time that's not money. Again, if it's $250,000, I don't have access to that. So yeah, you're talking my language. But otherwise, if it's a super exclusive T-shirt, it's not just all T-shirts. If it's an exclusive T-shirt that comes with this privilege of being one of 5 that has it, that's a totally different thing. It's not about the T-shirt. It's about the access. It's about the exclusivity. One of my favorite things to give away as a reward is access to a lockpicking class, which is something that people don't usually get access to. So give me something that I can't get or buy on my own. Or most likely won't. Give me, let's say, lunch with an executive, a premier parking spot. Buy cupcakes for my entire team and call the reason out as me. Like, I can't do that for myself. That's like someone else putting me on a pedestal.
Well, that's different. So, I mean, going back to your previous examples, like we do a whole show on cigars. And a lot of times it's not about the cost of cigars. Like, the cigars can be in the $10 to $15 range. However, if there's a very short supply of cigars that are only handed out at events, and I'm rewarded with one of those cigars because I worked with the manufacturer, or I attended the event, I developed a relationship, and they're like, hey, I want you to have one of these. It's not about the value, the monetary value of that cigar. It's about the over-encompassing value of that cigar, that it's exclusive to me. And that's a very different reward system from the monetary rewards that we started talking about in the beginning of the conversation, right?
Yeah, so exactly to your point. If it's something that has special meaning or something that I literally just can't go out and buy on my own,
right?
That's a game changer.
Yeah. It's like when I think about, like, when you think about losing a possession, a lot of times it's not about the monetary value, because sure, I could go replace it or have insurance compensate me money so I can go replace it. But if it's something as ridiculous as like the socks I got from Domain Tools, one of our sponsors, like, I can't go to the store and buy those. Like, that's an exclusive club. Those, what you're saying is those tend to make the best rewards.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's great advice. To the other Security Weekly members, questions for Masha.
Yeah, I had a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff.
Me? Am I up?
You're up, Jeff.
You had framed this, Paul, as this is awareness for end users, I believe.
Yes.
And my question, I guess, is what are the limitations? How far can you take this? Because that seems to be a pretty finite activity, or at least I had a conversation last night with somebody trying to define the difference between a vision and a goal, and this seems to be more like a goal. So, what is the vision? How far can this go?
So, I'll tell you how I applied it while I was working at Salesforce. If I wanted a group of people to do something different than they were doing today, and it had a benefit to security, it fed into my program. And so what that looked like is security awareness for general employees. Great. That was phishing. That was reporting. Then you start thinking about secure code development, right? And how do you find and fix bugs faster? And that went into DevOps and secure coding practices and SDLC, which is another application of this, but just for a different set of behaviors. And then it actually expanded out to our customer base, because one of the things we wanted them to do was adopt security features like two-factor authentication and IP range restrictions, because it benefited them and their platform, and it benefited our product and the security of their data. So the extent of what you can use these tools for are pretty vast, especially if you have a framework that can say, what is the behavioral outcome that I'm trying to get to? Why are people not doing that now? What kind of tools do I have in my toolbox? Is it awareness? Is it training? Is it motivation? Is it incentives? Is it increasing ability? And applying the right tool for the right root cause, and then seeing how that affects the behavior you want to influence and measuring it along the way. And you think about that, the implementations of this are pretty vast. It's the intersection of humans and security in every way that it shows up.
And so, sorry, more questions from the panel?
I have a question.
Yes, not Kevin.
It's really interesting because we talk about language quite often, particularly between security and other portions of the business, and that falling over, which is generally why we have so many issues, particularly from a communication standpoint. And utilizing gamification and positive reinforcement is absolutely fascinating to kind of bring that as a means to gap. So maybe my question I'm asking is, for organizations who don't have clear lines providing education or awareness or even training, maybe smaller organizations that are underfunded, understaffed, what would be your top 3 things to start or provide a foundation to build a program like this?
Yeah. So number 1, figure out what you're trying to change. If I could ask for one thing, stop sending out the newsletters and the videos and the CBTs just to say I'm busy and we're doing awareness. Figure out what the goal is. Figure out what's going to look different tomorrow when you have a magic wand and your perfect program. Because most people can't answer that. Prioritize them, figure out your top 3 like we were talking about. Once you figure out what those top 3 are, ask why people aren't doing that right now. And instead of just punishing people for not doing those things, which we do well, figure out an easy and cheap way to start. Even a thank you email is enough. You can find other ways of creating more leaderboards or T-shirts or stickers, but it doesn't have to be a formalized program. Literally, a thank you email has gone a long way in the organizations that I've seen that have very little budget. And then track your progress to see if people are actually improving, and then continue asking, is it getting better? If not, why? You might find that the root causes are not what you thought they were. I'll give you an example. I thought I needed to change the culture of tailgating while I was at Salesforce. And I thought people just didn't know the policy, so I spent a whole bunch of education around, this is the policy, wear your badge visibly. And when I realized it wasn't doing much, I went around on a fact-finding mission. I said, what's going on? Like, why are you not wearing your badge? I would stop people at the door and say, where's your badge? I'm curious. And a lot of people said, my badge pull broke, and I don't know where to get a new one. So I keep it in my wallet. And the fix for that program was a bowl full of badge pulls at every door.
Right.
And it changed overnight. And that was not what I was training on.
Yeah, and that's like a couple $100 to fix that problem, perhaps, right? Versus like all of the different options, which are a much more a time suck and pulling everyone else's budget. But the solution was just very straightforward. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, painful lesson.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that inherently people want to be nice, specifically with tailgating, right? And we've done interviews over the years with many different social engineers, and they kind of prey upon the fact that, in general, like, people want to be nice. Now, there's a lot of sociology and psychology behind that, but, you know, when you work for Salesforce, for example, and you want to be helpful to who you think are your fellow employees, you want to be nice. And social engineers certainly, you know, prey upon that, and that can be a difficult thing to overcome in your in your security awareness training programs.
Absolutely. One of the ways that I have found to be helpful is to prove to people it's an actual problem. They don't like to confront each other for just for policy.
Right.
But what I did is I showed people videos of people walking in behind them and stealing laptops, and said, "Have you seen this person?" And showed videos of it actually happening. And overnight, people are like, "I got it. I understand why this policy exists. I understand why I'm supposed to ask for people behind me." And it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I have a motivation to do it now that I didn't before.
And you have to create that motivation. And I can certainly attest to that when I used to have a pen testing company. You know, the second time that we would send someone on site and employees would recognize that person, like, immediately they were like, no, hold on, you got to leave. Like, I got burned by that, and, like, I've learned my lesson. I understand my motivations. I understand I got to protect the company. Like, no way am I letting you on site, like, ever again. So, like, you learn as a pen test company to send different people, but even then, if they understand those motivations, certainly that can help you know, with that issue.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you are speaking, Masha, at Source Boston on, is it the Thursday? The second day, I believe.
Thursday, yeah, 9 a.m.
Thursday morning. We will be there as well. I encourage everyone to attend. And if you are attending, of course, the 9 a.m. Keynote. Masha, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was awesome talking with you.
It was great talking to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and cover the security news for this week. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.